Welcome to the Never Ending Backlog podcast, your place for short reviews from a gamer with the goal of reducing his backlog. From adventures to sandboxes, join our host as we walk through a collection of unplayed treasures. Now, let's take a look at the featured game of this episode of the Never Ending Backlog.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Never Ending Backlog podcast, your place for bite-sized PC game reviews. I'm your host, Zach, and today we are going to be reviewing the adventure game Back to the Future Episode 1, It's About Time. So, first and foremost, I am not a huge fan of adventure games, and there's some kind of small reasons why I'll explain why a little bit later on in this podcast. But for now, let's just jump right into the kind of the general information about it. It is an adventure game that is point and click, very similar to most adventure games. It does have actual manual control of Marty, the main character. So if you've ever seen the Back to the Future movies, you get to control Marty actually with the keypad on your keyboard, which is nice. So it gives you some type of control there. It's based in the same realm of Back to the Future movies, has many of the same characters, has all the same voice actors for the most part, which is really cool. So that part's really neat there. For resolution graphics, it works really well. It's a very smooth operating game. It defaulted at 640 by 480, and when moving the resolution larger to the right, which traditionally would, so you go 640, maybe it goes to 1024 by 768, and just keeps on building up. You'd expect at the end would be 1920 by 1080, but it's actually not. It's actually at the far left, below 640 by 480, and it doesn't it's not a continuous loop. So they put it there first, I'm assuming because they figured that was the most default standard, but it's odd that they didn't default at that resolution, especially since my monitor at that time was 1920 by 1080. So kind of weird how that all worked out that way, but nonetheless, it worked really well there. The game ran extremely smooth. There were no playback errors whatsoever. I didn't have any glitches. Nothing broke, which is nice to see. Not really that surprising. Telltale Games does a lot of great work when it comes to their development. It just seems to work really well. And I would also assume that making an adventure game is probably less demanding sometimes, at least graphically, than other game types. It's not quick reactions, quick moving, bam, bam, bam. It's more smoother, story driven, less of a action, more adventure. So for the quality, very impressed with the music and sound effects. There's a chime-like sound in the Back to the Future movies. If you've ever seen it, there's a sound effect. It's like I can't even try to mimic it because I don't sound like a chime or bells or xylophone, but not xylophone, but it's either like a bells or a chime kind of thing. And they actually did it in the first little bit of the game, and immediately I got goosebumps. It was an amazing experience. It was like, wow, they really did capture the movie series in this game, which is awesome. Like I said, they had most of the original actors from the game doing voiceovers, which is really cool to see. The design is well done. The graphics are really well put together. It's smooth. It's got a really cool artistic vibe of like cartoony comic book, kind of like that Penny Arcade series. I think it's really cool there. The writing is really well done. I'm not going to spoil anything, but here's what I'm not going to spoil the game itself. I'm not going to spoil, what the whole plot and principle is. What I am going to say is it's not an exact remake. Actually, it's not a remake at all of Back to the Future 1, 2, or 3. So if you feel like you're just going to be replaying those movies, you're not. It does offer a lot of new storyline, which is really cool. And if you ever wanted to see, Back to the Future 4, which was never created, at least not yet, you never know. This would be a really cool option for it. Now, the other great thing about this type of stuff is, since they got the original voice actors, their voice sounds relatively the same across the board. It's really cool because you kind of get to experience them as if they made a Back to the Future 4 directly after Back to the Future 3. Because their voices, like I said, didn't change much, but they can use animations like that to mimic them being younger still. So I think that's a really cool feature of the game. Gameplay, it's a standard adventure game. There isn't really an attacking or violent component. I mean, there might be like fights and stuff like that, but it's not like instant control. It's like click here to do this and click here to do that. It's a very delayed experience. It's really easy for newer gamers to partake in, or perhaps those who are not in the mood to be rushed, or maybe someone that just doesn't have those quick reflexes. Adventure games could be right up their alley, or those that really appreciate good storytelling. Because I would say right now, adventure games rely heavily on their storytelling ability. So if you enjoy that, this is probably right up your alley. Let's see what else we got here. Controls are pretty easy. Like I said, it's just point and click. You can use the keypad arrows or WSAD to move your character around. It's not really much of a learning curve at all there regarding the actual controls. For the game economy, this part was kind of interesting, and I guess I heard about this in the news, but I guess I never even really followed it. So the game had a historical low of $2.40. However, it's not for sale anywhere. At the request of the publisher, it has been unlisted on Steam and other services. Apparently, it was delisted in 2018 due to financial hardships at Telltale Games. So right now, you can't really find it anywhere, which is unfortunate because I'm sure there's a lot of adventure player games and Back to the Future gamers that would probably actually enjoy this game series. So hopefully, rights or publishing rights get passed around somewhere where they can actually put this back up for sale. I realized interesting side story here on this one is in the past, so I'm a big fan of Stargate, huge fan of SG-1 series and all this stuff. And a long time ago, they actually made an SG-1 game that was actually released on Steam. So I have quite a few of the Stargate SG-1 games. A lot of them are like prototype services and stuff like that. But there was one that was actually released for sale. And it was a bummer because this is when I didn't really have the internet at the time. I was primarily, using like school at my college, using their internet to, browse around, stuff like that. Doing exactly what I should be doing in college, just browsing the internet for games. But nonetheless, the game was out there for Stargate. I can't remember the name of it, but it bummed me out that I didn't buy it because I think it was on sale when I saw it. And like about a week later, they took it off the market. And if anyone that follows Stargate series or Stargate in general, you know that there is a lot of issues with their corporate structure. The rights, the publishing cycle, it's just a bloodbath. Literally read into the Stargate, basically what happens in the back. There's a ton of just terrible experiences. There's lots of games that have been canceled. There's a lot of shows and movies that were canceled. A lot of the actors want to come back, and then it's a bloodbath. It's amazing how bad that franchise is managed, unfortunately, because like I said, it's a great series, or a great thing. I loved all of them. Universe, Atlantis, all of them. So anyway, it's interesting that I saw a game that's been delisted. I haven't seen that in a long time, so it's an interesting experience to see. So for the final review, I guess, of this game, I'm a big fan of the Back to the Future series. I think it's a really cool series. Back to the Future 2 obviously is my favorite because it touches base on a lot of cool sci-fi stuff. And not to go into another tangent, but that's what these podcasts are all about, is tangents and video games. There was a game that came out for the GameCube. It might have been on other systems too, but the GameCube is what I remember it on. And it's called Universal Studios. And basically, you're a kid that walks around Universal Studios, and you basically have all these mini games that are based on rides at Universal Studios. And Back to the Future is one of them. And just an awesome game. I highly recommend it to anybody. I enjoyed it thoroughly because you might not know this, but I am from Michigan. I was from a very, rural part of Michigan, and we didn't have internet. Didn't have phone lines, and didn't have any type of cable, DirecTV, or anything like that when I was a kid. So I relied heavily on games to basically expand me to the world. Nearest neighbors were Amish. So needless to say, I did have power though. So right there. And my father worked for computers, with computers for different groups. So a lot of my time, like I said, I was playing video games like that. So the Universal Studios kind of opened up my world and made me feel like I was actually exploring it. Kind of offered that free roam experience. So if you like Universal Studios, you like theme parks, especially now, I guess, with less people going to theme parks right now during this pandemic and such, this might actually be a really great spot for you. So I highly recommend it. Universal Studios for GameCube. There probably is another word to that, but if you do a quick search on that, you'll find it pretty quickly. Anyway, back to features in that, and I thought that was a really cool minigame. Now, there is, like I said, I am not a fan of adventure games for a few small reasons. One, I like quicker games that move around and flash more. Not quicker as in shorter, but quicker as in, it moves around real quick. Like, think of first-person shooters or think of RPGs. Even some RPGs are a little bit slower, but I can usually make them work because I get more control over it. And the next reason is a huge reason why I have a hard time with these type of adventure games. And primarily, I like to be creative on how I solve problems. And with the adventure games, you essentially have one or two paths. It's a very scripted experience because they want to keep the storyline under control. So you have to figure out a combination, which is frustrating. It's things like, there's a fire in a kitchen, and in your inventory you have a water bottle that's filled with water, and you would assume, hey, I can throw water at this fire and put this fire out. Neat. And they'll be like, nope, you can't do that. That water is reserved for something else later on. So you have to go into the next room, get like a key from a person that you do, you talk to them for like 10 minutes about, get a key from him, go back into the kitchen, unlock the sprinkler system and push the sprinkler button. It's stuff like that frustrates me, where it's like, no, if it was really me, I'd just throw some water on it real quick and call it good. I understand that there's a storyline and people like that challenge. For me, it's just a frustrating experience. That storyline didn't actually happen in the game. There was no sprinkler or water bottle to my knowledge yet. There might be later on, but I'm just not aware of it. But it's not allowing me to do what I want to do is frustrating. I like that free roam ability. I like the ability to, quickly solve problems in a creative way that I want to. And most games still struggle with this. I mean, it's not like Call of Duty is opening up all these new free roaming choice abilities where it's like, oh, figure out a way to have peace instead of war and all that stuff. Like, I understand it's not quite there yet. But I have more than one choice. Like Far Cry 5, I can actually go and do different quests in different orders. I can do different things. I can solve them in different ways. They might have one objective, but there's a different way I can accomplish it, whether it's crazy or not. And I like that choice. I need games to give me a choice. And until adventure games can do that, I'm unfortunately probably not going to be as interested in them. So I'll most likely not keep this game installed. It's a really cool game, and it follows the source material really well. And it adds a lot on it, which is awesome. But adventure games really do push me from the series, or from this type of game. One thing, and AI Invasion shares this, is I do own the other Back to the Future games. I likely bought them in a Telltale bundle, because I do have quite a few Telltale games. And you'll find this out about me quickly, is I buy games just to usually support the developers or support charities if I use Humble Bundle. So I buy them relatively. And also, I mean, I like to collect them, even if I'm not going to play them. I just like to have them. One day, maybe I'll share a picture of my wall of physical PC games, because they're not all in boxes. Like, I have like the jewel cases with PC games, but there are hundreds. And anytime I find a chance to buy them on eBay or at different shops or anything along those lines, I pick them up left and right, because it's a dying medium. So in Steam games, I love buying them too, because you might think like, oh, they're there forever. They're not. Like, look at Back to the Future, not for sale anymore, or Stargate, not for sale anymore. So they're also a dying medium as well, especially with publishers and game companies merging and buying each other and going out of business. It's an aggressive world for collectors, which I think is really fun. But anyway, like I said, I have more than one Back to the Future game. So although I am uninstalling Back to the Future Episode 1, it's about time, I have a feeling they'll have mentions of that game in future games. So hopefully, I can do it. I'm sure I can. I'm sure there's not like some restriction that doesn't allow me to play Episode 2 without beating number 1 first, because that'd be frustrating. If so, I guess I'd have to reinstall episode 1 and just play it all the way through, which I would, just to get to number 2. Or I hope that the storyline is somewhat independent. I mean, I know Back to the Future 1 is different than Back to the Future 2, Back to the Future 3, but they do kind of play off each other. But the nice thing about the movies is they do show, like, basically on previous episode of Back to the Future, and it kind of goes like a recap of what happened. I'm hoping the games kind of follow a similar suit, so that way I can at least get, some idea. I don't really think of it as a spoiler, just because I don't plan on probably playing it. So, like I said, it's going to get uninstalled. Maybe someday if I ever get into adventure games, they'll get reinstalled. But for right now, I think I'm good just uninstalling it, enjoying, getting my hour game time in on it, and at least just playing it. So that's it for this episode of the Never Ending Backlog. Today we've covered Back to the Future, episode 1. It's About Time. And like I said, unfortunately, you won't be able to pick this one up. But for everyone out there, if you like adventure games, I highly recommend it. All right, everybody. Thank you very much.